Hi lovelies, this episode contains discussions of sexual abuse and bullying. If this raises any issues for you, support is available through the links and phone numbers in the show notes. I'll see you in the next episode. Hi and welcome back to Bounce Forward with me, Tiff Hall. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this podcast, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. Now, have you ever been so close to a goal you can almost taste it and then you self-sabotage? Maybe you're eating really healthily for 2 weeks and then work gets stressful and you start to have fast food every night of the week. Or perhaps you really want to lose a bit of weight but keep pressing snooze on your alarm to get up and go to the gym. We set a goal and then we start doing everything to cause ourselves to fail. Why do we do this when it is so irrational? After I had my daughter, I was 40 kilos heavier. I desperately wanted to lose the weight to ease the pressure on my joints, to fit into my clothes again, to feel lighter when exercising and not to be so out of breath when walking up the stairs. My goal was to exercise for 20 minutes in the morning at 5 a.m. before the kids woke up. But every morning the alarm would go off and I would hit that snooze button. I knew the way forward towards reaching my goal would be to get out of bed and do the 20 minutes of exercise. But every morning I self-sabotaged by hitting that snooze button. I don't know why I kept doing this for months and months. Was it fear? The long road ahead of me? Did I not believe in myself enough to do it? All those months, and I still don't know what was holding me back. Eventually, I did get out of bed and I started, but getting there was so hard. Getting started felt impossible, and it was me, all me, standing in my own way. Today, I'm joined by my good friend Dunn, a clinical psychologist and host of the Crappy to Happy podcast, to hear her expertise on why we fall into these traps and how to stay focused on our goals. Cass, welcome to Bounce Forward. Welcome back. I'm so excited you're here. Now, a big thing that's been coming up in my community and people have been asking me on and on about is about self-sabotage. So can you break down the psychology of self-sabotage for me and just why? Why do we do it?
Such a great topic, and I know this one comes up all the time. It's been one of the big topics ever since the beginning of TXO. So let's, first of all, I would like to say that in psychology we call it, the technical term is self-handicapping, and it probably has a slightly different meaning to what you're talking about with your community and with your members. So genuine self-handicapping is when a person does something that basically gives them a built-in excuse to fail. So for example, going out and partying the night before a big exam, or a big race, something like that. So doing something that is clearly going to undermine their performance. And the psychology of that, we think, is that it would be so incredibly difficult and painful to put in your best effort and fail that you basically give yourself a built-in excuse so that if you put in the effort and you fail, you can say, oh, well, it's because I stayed out so late and I did that thing, and really, if I'd been on my best game, like if I hadn't done that, then maybe I would have actually given myself a chance to succeed. And the flip side is that if they do the thing, the self-handicapping behavior, and they still succeed, they can feel like a champion because, wow, even though I went out and, partied all night, I still passed the exam. So either way, their sense of self-worth and their sense of competence and ability kind of remains intact. They never put themselves in that situation where they have to really face up to the fact that I might do everything and give it my all and still not be good enough. So it's often a term that was used with, it is used with professional athletes, for example. So that's what real self-handicapping is. I think when we're talking about self-sabotage in terms of people who are setting goals for themselves and then not doing the things that they need to do, there's probably maybe there's a bit of that going on, but there's usually something else going on. And I think it can be one of many things. I think, truthfully, sometimes there's an underlying, we can get to this a little bit later, sometimes there's subconscious beliefs about what I am worthy of or deserving of, or just my self-concept. I don't see myself as that fit, healthy, happy person. I have a self-concept of, that is something different, and I can't reconcile those two things. So I keep defaulting back to this old behavior. But truthfully, I think we can be honest about the fact that nobody ever sets themselves a goal, knows all the right things to do, creates an action plan, starts on the plan, and then follows it 100%, hits the goal, happy days, I'm on my way. Like, this is just such an unrealistic expectation, right? It is such an unrealistic expectation. Mm-hmm. People have setbacks. We're all human. We're not robotic. We set goals, we make plans, we fall off the wagon, we fall back into old patterns of behavior. This is just a normal part of being human. And I think sometimes we can get too hung up on this, oh my God, why do I keep self-sabotaging? When in actual fact, all I'm doing is just being a human. And if I could be more accepting of the fact that success is not linear, progress is never linear, and actually be a little bit kinder to myself in those moments and accept that that's kind of a normal part of any change process. And there is a fairly typical change process that people go through, and we can talk about that as well. But part of the process is that once you get going, often you'll have a setback, like you'll have a slip up. And the idea is you've just got to pick up and keep moving forward and not let that setback become some big, let the all or nothing thinking come in, let that define you. Go into the stories in your head about how I never stick to anything and I'm such a failure and it's not good enough and other people can do this but I can't do this. All of that sort of stuff, which just puts you straight back to square one. And, and then call that self-sabotage.
So how can you recognize the self-sabotage? How can you be outside yourself and go, oh, hey, I'm doing it again?
Well, mindfulness is a big part of that. And and a key thing about mindfulness, I always talk about mindfulness, bang on and on and on about mindfulness, which is obviously being, present enough to observe what's happening, what you're doing, what's happening outside of you, my thoughts, my feelings, my behaviors, being able to witness that without judgment. But a huge part of mindfulness is self-kindness. It's being able to observe what's happening as it's happening without judgment. And if we talk about, what I just referred to before, like there is so much self-judgment and self-criticism. People are able to observe themselves. They're able to see what they're doing, but it's layered with all of this negative self-talk and all of this overly identifying with their behaviors, like as if that defines them.
Yes.
And this is where, so mindfulness is about I'm not defined by that thing that I did. Like I'm not defined by, and I don't have to believe every thought that I think. I can simply observe that. I can then use that as useful information. If I can drop the judgment and just be curious, I can use that information to inform me and have a think about, well, what might have triggered that? Like what was going on for me in that moment? What is it that causes me to reach for the snacks at 9:00 every night? And how might I just do something different? So I can start to make some changes to my behavior while still allowing myself, accepting that, I'm human, I'm a work in progress. And, but with some presence of mind and with some kindness, I can change that. Bit by bit, I can change those things so that I create some new habits.
That's really important when we're talking triggers, because it's the trigger, isn't it, that can force you to self-sabotage, and you've got to be able to be mindful to recognize all those triggers. That's really hard.
Yeah, it can be. And, I think also to get to the deeper kind of things that could be going on, there is also research that shows that if people have certain potentially like unconscious, out of their conscious awareness, ideas and beliefs about what they're worthy of, like I said, what they're deserving of, what kind of person they are. They've got all of these old stories about, I'm not a sporty person, I'm not a fit person, I'm a lazy person, everybody's got all of these stories going on. Then sometimes those can override any conscious decision that you make about what you want for yourself. Like our behaviors are driven much more by our unconscious ideas and beliefs, which sort of lie dormant, and you don't even really know they're there until you start doing these things that just feel like so annoyingly wrong and not in alignment with what you want. And so sometimes it can be worth digging for those things. And there is some research that particularly for women who have experienced abuse or been, unwanted sexual advances, they have often, and this was discovered when they were doing obesity trials and women lost a lot of weight. They were doing really well, and then out of nowhere, they just started to pile the weight back on. And then when they started to question them and ask questions about what was going on for them, well, I think it was one woman in particular disclosed that there had been childhood sexual abuse, and that was kind of interesting. And then they started asking all of these other women, and they found the same thing. So for those women, and possibly men as well, and certainly men had reported childhood bullying and things like that as well, then they perceived that to be thin or to be perceived as more attractive was dangerous, that was going to potentially invite unwanted sexual advances. And sometimes that happens. As soon as somebody gets paid a compliment, switch, they're back, eating all the things. Because that's a trigger for them. That's subconsciously that's unsafe. And so, there are potentially things like that going on for people that obviously need a little bit of deeper exploration. But every time you say that, every time I refer to that, people will go, "Oh my God, like that's me. Like that's what's happened to me." It's a complicated question.
How do we replace triggers with glimmers?
We have a built-in negativity bias, and we have, as I said, like all of this unconscious programming that causes us to seek out, not even consciously, but causes us to be much more aware and vigilant to potential danger in our world. And also our nervous system is constantly reacting to what it perceives to be threatening, even if there is nothing, like even if consciously there is nothing that you perceive as threatening. If you've had past experiences, then the slightest thing, a smell, a certain type of haircut on a person can cause your nervous system to be activated, and you're not even really aware of that. So this is something else that goes on for people, which, can take a bit of work to get to, because all of our behaviors, when I talk about unconscious thoughts and feelings, well, often like there's all of this unconscious stuff that's going on in our nervous system, in our body, and our physiology. And so that can also be a factor that leads to behaviors that are not in line with what we, would choose, not the things that we want to do that we know is good for us and healthy and taking us in the right direction, but it can feel very much out of control. And so I guess what glimmers are is when we intentionally seek out the signs or the evidence that we are safe. And it's for our nervous system to feel more calm and relaxed, and so that we can then make choices that are more in alignment with what is, in our best interests, and coming from a place of psychological, emotional safety. And so that's about, again, it really comes back to self-compassion, but it also comes back to really noticing and reminding ourselves of what is good, how we are good, the things that we can be grateful for, the people who support us, our own personal sense of our strengths and our values and what makes us a good person. So I guess, in that sense, like glimmers are those opportunities to find something that is good and positive, but ultimately that cause us to feel calm in our nervous system and safe and relaxed, because from that place we can make much healthier choices.
That's a beautiful answer. Negativity bias is scary. It is just scary.
Oh, it's the worst.
Yeah, I feel it daily. I remind myself of it every day.
Yeah.
Quick, say something positive. That's just your negativity bias. It's just crazy. So, Cass, how do we maintain motivation?
Journaling's good for that too, by the way. Journaling is really, really helpful. Even if you're not a journaly type person, like just taking some time, even if you don't journal, even the whole gratitude, what is good, what can I appreciate, like just reminding yourself that all of this stuff in our heads, all of this worst case scenario, disaster, critical, negative, judgy thinking. It's not true. None of it's true. Thoughts aren't facts.
Yeah, the catastrophic thinking.
Yeah. I went to bed last night actually and lay down and thought, I don't do it as often as I should. But I lay in bed last night feeling intentionally grateful for everything. And it's just nice. It helps you relax and sleep better, because nighttime's the worst for the negativity,
Yes.
like all of the things, going around in your head.
So important.
So motivation.
Motivation, yes. How do we stay motivated when we keep self-sabotaging?
All right. You and I know this, Tiff. You and I know this, that motivation is not a reliable, we cannot rely on motivation to get us through anything. Motivation is fleeting. It's like it's a flaky friend. It doesn't show up when you need it. You absolutely cannot rely on motivation. So there's probably a couple of layers to this as well. Number one, ideally what we want to be relying on is creating new habits, not feeling like we have to be motivated every day to do the things that we need to do. What we want to do is to start making incremental, teeny tiny changes to our routine that over time become new healthy habits. And so the way we do that is maybe we swap out the third coffee for a herbal tea. Maybe we add in some stretching or some exercise before the shower or after the shower. Like we try to build into our existing kind of chain of habits, because we all have habits our whole day. Even if you think you don't have a morning routine, yeah, you do, because you get up and do the same thing every morning. We all do. For me, it's like Wordle, coffee. So we all have a morning routine. It's just, and then once you can unpack that, you can kind of find the little windows of where you could add in something that is healthy, and do that consistently enough. It doesn't have to be a massive big change, but if it's consistent enough, it will become a new part of your routine, and then your brain doesn't have to think about it anymore. Your brain loves habits because it doesn't have to stop and think and ask a question. Oh, should I do this or should I not do that? Do I want to go to the gym now or do I not want to go to the gym now? If it's just such a routine thing that I do that it doesn't have to think, it conserves mental energy, and you just do it on autopilot.
Thank you, Cass. Thank you so much for joining me on Bounce Forward. That's so helpful, such great advice for everyone.
I'm so happy to be here again. Thank you for inviting me.
It was so wonderful to catch up with Cass again. I always love talking to her. Make sure you check out her awesome podcast, Crappy to Happy. If you love this ep and want to hear more, please rate and review it wherever you get your podcasts. And I love hearing from you. So get in contact with me via my email, bounceforward@novaentertainment.com.au. Thanks for joining us and happy days.